Getting into healing mode with FSM. Promoting the healing response by balancing autonomic nervous system function via vagal nerve stimulation using frequency-specific microcurrent. Or in other words, how to promote healing with FSM. In the next 10 minutes or so, you'll learn what is the healing response, how the body regulates the healing response, the critical role of the vagus nerve in the healing response, what suppresses the healing response, what can reactivate a suppressed healing response, how to use FSM or frequency-specific microcurrent to activate the healing response, and other ways to activate the healing response. What is the healing response? A healing response is a living organism's vital biological process of repairing damaged tissue or recovering from disease. Our body's physiology, the inner working of our organs, is constantly shifting back and forth like a teeter-totter. We shift in and out of a healing state depending on the demands being made on us, on our body. Under the direction of our autonomic nervous system, we're constantly shifting from a state of sympathetic dominance to a state of parasympathetic dominance. In sympathetic dominance, our physiology is using resources and spending energy. And in sympathetic dominance, the rebuilding of our tissues, our healing response, is suppressed. Then when we're in parasympathetic dominance, we're in a healing state. In parasympathetic dominance, we digest food, rebuild tissues, resupply nutrients to cells. This is when we do our house cleaning and healing in the body. So our physiology is either running a race or resting and recuperating from the race. Healing processes are suppressed when we're running the race and restored when our physiology returns to parasympathetic dominance. The diagram on the right of this slide shows the two parts of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is on the left in the orange or tan color, and the parasympathetic is illustrated on the right in the green color. Here on the far right in the green diagram of the parasympathetic nervous system, you'll see arrows pointing to the vagus nerve. The vagus is a large nerve that innervates our internal organs, all the way from the esophagus down to the transverse colon. When our parasympathetic nervous system wants to move us into healing mode, it sends signals through the vagus nerve to most of our internal organs. It is what switches on our rest and digest, recovery and healing activity for most of our internal organs. There are three things that suppress vagal nerve function and keep it from initiating a healing response in the body. These are stress, trauma, and infections or chronic infections. Chronic stress, unresolved trauma, and chronic infections increase sympathetic nervous system arousal in the body and at the same time suppress parasympathetic function and thereby vagus nerve function. Stress has been normalized in our society, I think, to the extent that we no longer really know that we're under stress. It's just so normal. In reality, most people are stressed. Here are some statistics from 2025. As of April 29, 2025, research polling showed that 77% of Americans reported feeling anxious about their financial situation. 58% felt that finances controlled their lives, and 52% had difficulty controlling their money-related worries. Another study dated April 8, 2025, found that nearly 90% of American adults reported losing sleep at night because of worries about health and the economy. About 75% of Americans reported experiencing physical or mental symptoms of stress within the last month. And this video is being recorded in June of 2026. That's a year later. I think most people would agree that the stress on the planet has increased significantly during the last year. And so the point is that our physiology often reacts to the world even when we're not aware of it. So, for instance, our blood pressure starts to rise and we wonder why. We're often not aware that we're experiencing stress and that it's impacting our body physiology. And it's also suppressing our healing response. With chronic stress, we can get into a cycle of deteriorating health. Trauma is a second factor that suppresses our healing response. Trauma elicits an acute stress and alarm reaction in our body's physiology. Emotional trauma that has not been released constantly reactivates the stress physiology and prevents us from being in a healing state. Physical trauma can also become a literal block to healing. So our body can go into a lockdown mode in reaction to either emotional or physical trauma, and this perpetuates a sympathetic dominant state. And that is, it perpetuates a state in which our healing response, our healing processes are constantly being suppressed. To repeat unresolved trauma, whether emotional or physical, can also lead to a cycle of deteriorating health. Another way that the vagus nerve in our healing response gets suppressed is through chronic infections. These infections are often subacute, meaning they're not in the acute phase of the infection, but very low grade, an ongoing one. And such infections turn off the vagus nerve and thereby suppress our body's ability to heal. When someone suffers a chronic infection for years, their healing response has been suppressed for years. So there is also a vicious cycle that occurs with chronic infection. The pathogens causing the chronic infection suppress the immune system and the body's repair processes. The suppression of the healing response causes our health to deteriorate and prevents resolution or clearing of the infection. Frequency-specific microcurrent can break these vicious cycles by treating whatever is suppressing the healing response and by stimulating the vagus nerve. The primary strategy is to stimulate the vagus nerve with protocols like the concussion in vagus, vagal tone, or vagus nerve stimulation to activate vagal nerve function and shift the physiology into a healing mode. With the vagal system activated, our body then mobilizes its healing resources and begins to address the cause of vagal nerve suppression. Most people tend to focus on the stress, trauma, or chronic infection first. The thinking is that our body is not going to be able to heal itself until we are rid of these three. Many people have time limitations in terms of how long they can treat themselves daily, and if there is a time limitation, the preference generally is to focus on vagus nerve stimulation first. Once you've spent time, a week or a month, depending, stimulating vagal nerve function, then you can add FSM treatments for the stress, trauma, or infection. To treat stress, you would use protocols like quiet sympathetics, adrenals quiet, relax and balance, or the PTSD protocol. Trauma includes many things, so to treat trauma, you may be using the concussion protocol, the PTSD protocol, or you may be using protocols to help heal physical injuries, to joints, to the spine, to soft tissues, or you might be using a post-surgery protocol. To treat chronic infection, you would use any of the protocols that target the specific virus or bacteria that is suspected. Some examples might be GI SIBO, bacterial sinus, flu, respiratory organs, brain, which is for viral infections, or the Lyme protocol. To summarize then, stress, trauma, and chronic infections all suppress vagal nerve function, preventing the healing response. We can use FSM to reactivate vagal nerve function and push our physiology back into a healing state. This reactivation of our healing response is essential to resolving the original issue, whether it is stress, trauma, or chronic infection. Adding additional FSM protocols that target the stress, the trauma, or the chronic infection should speed the healing process, but you want to focus on maintaining vagal nerve function as a primary objective. That's it for this video. Thank you for listening.